Edinburgh, 1937. A crimson-sealed invitation lures Miss Jane Marple to the Gilded Manor, where a Highland lord dreads anonymous letters that promise a dagger's kiss. Within 48 hours, the host lies stabbed beneath ancestral eyes, digitalis thick in his veins, a priest's hole yawning behind the panelling. Two lovers, a bankrupt heir, a jealous beauty, and a doctor nursing a 15-year-old secret, every one of them poised above a fortune. In 7 razor-sharp chapters, the quiet old lady from Much Benham unravels poison, substitution, and midnight footsteps to reveal not one murderer, but 2. Stay for the click of knitting needles that stitches guilt to the final thread. Chapter 1. The Unexpected Summons. Miss Jane Marple had just finished arranging the Michaelmas daisies in the blue lustre vase on the mantelpiece when the postman's rat-tat sounded at the door of Danemead Cottage. It was a crisp October morning in Much Benham, the sort that made one think of wood smoke and roasted chestnuts, and Miss Marple, in her dove-grey woolen dress and the cameo brooch that had belonged to her mother, felt pleasantly occupied with small domestic certainties. The maid, Cherry, brought in the silver tray with 2 letters and the morning paper. One envelope was a bill from the draper's, nothing there to quicken the pulse. The other, however, was of heavy cream stock. The address written in a clerkly hand and sealed with a blob of crimson wax impressed by a signet ring, a stag's head beneath a coronet. Miss Marple turned it over thoughtfully, then slit the flap with the ivory paper knife. Inside lay a card, stiff and gilt-edged. Lord Alistair Mackenzie requests the pleasure of the company of Miss Jane Marple at the Gilded Manor, Edinburgh, from Friday the 18th to Monday the 21st of October, to celebrate his 60th birthday. Car will meet the 10:15 from King's Cross. A smaller note, in ink that had spluttered slightly from a fountain pen, was clipped beneath. My dear Miss Marple, your name was given me by Sir Henry Clithering, who assures me that your presence at a country house is the best insurance against mischief. We are a quiet party, but I confess to a certain uneasiness. Anonymous letters, you understand. Nothing must spoil the occasion. Yours very sincerely, Alistair Mackenzie. Miss Marple laid the card upon the gate-legged table and gazed out at the neat box hedges. Sir Henry, dear man, had always exaggerated her talents, yet she felt the familiar stir of curiosity, like a cat twitching its whiskers at a rustle in the leaves. Cherry, lingering with the tea-cosy, ventured, "Edinburgh, miss? That's a long way for a weekend." "Indeed," said Miss Marple, "but Lord Mackenzie is clearly a gentleman who likes to be prepared. One does not summon a fire brigade after the house is ablaze." At 11 o'clock precisely, Mrs. Dane, Cissy Dane now, since her marriage to the Colonel, arrived in a gust of lenteric perfume and russet tweeds. She deposited a basket of Cox's orange pippins on the hall stand and sailed into the drawing-room. "Jane, you sly creature, I've just met the postman. Edinburgh, the Gilded Manor. Do you know it was built by old Hamish Mackenzie, who made a fortune in the Klondike and gilded everything that would stand still? They say the drawing-room ceiling is pure gold leaf, positively vulgar, but impressive." Miss Marple poured tea, Indian, not China, for Mrs. Dane liked it strong, and handed across a cucumber sandwich, thin as tissue. "I have never met his lordship," she said mildly, "though I once knew a Miss Mackenzie from Oban, who kept an hotel and poisoned the mind of the curate with tales of second sight. Relations, perhaps." Mrs. Dane leaned forward, eyes bright. "There's talk in town. Young Rory Fraser, his nephew, came a cropper in the city last year. Something about rubber shares. And the ward, Elspeth, is heiress to the Fraser millions. If Rory marries her, his debts vanish like morning mist. Then there's Lady Fiona, Alistair's sister, acid as a lemon and twice as sour. She was cut off with a pittance when she married that Austrian count who turned out to be a waiter." Miss Marple's needles clicked steadily. She was turning the heel of a gentleman's sock for the Belgian refugees. Motives enough for anonymous letters, one would think, though letters are often the weapon of the coward, or the person who wishes to appear so. Mrs. Dane lowered her voice. "They say the house is riddled with priests' holes and secret passages. Hamish Mackenzie was terrified of assassination, had the place built like a fortress. And the armoury, enough daggers to supply Macbeth." Miss Marple smiled. "I shall pack my thick vest and my common sense. Both have served me well in draughty houses." That afternoon she walked to the vicarage to consult the Reverend John Harbottle, who had once spent a summer improving his Greek on the Isle of Skye, and retained a shelf of Scottish guidebooks. He confirmed that the Gilded Manor lay 3 miles north of the city, overlooking the Firth, and that its reputation for grandeur was matched only by its reputation for chill. "Stone floors, my dear Miss Marple, and the wind finds every crevice. Take your hot water bottle." By evening she had written her acceptance, posted it, and laid out her travelling clothes. The navy costume with the astrakhan collar, the felt hat with the modest pheasant's feather, one evening gown of black lace, for one never knew, and the small morocco writing case in which she kept a notebook and a pencil sharpened to a surgical point. As she locked the front door and slipped the key beneath the geranium pot for Cherry, the church clock struck 6. Somewhere in the dusk a blackbird practised its autumn phrase. Miss Marple paused on the step, drawing her shawl closer. "Anonymous letters," she murmured to the quiet S. Street. "How very disagreeable, and how very revealing." She did not add that in her experience such letters were rarely the work of one hand alone, nor that the writer almost invariably sat at the same dinner table as the recipient. That would come later, when the train had carried her beyond the familiar hedgerows of Much Benham into the northern mist, where older passions smouldered beneath the heather. For now, the summons lay in her handbag like a ticket to a play whose plot was not yet written, and Miss Marple, who had seen many such dramas reach their 5th act, felt the pleasant anticipation of an audience who suspects the butler may not, after all, be the murderer. Chapter 2. Arrival at the Manor. The night express from King's Cross drew into Waverley Station at 20 minutes past 9, the engine exhaling great dragon breaths of steam that curled like wraiths beneath the glass roof. Miss Marple, who had slept lightly in her corner seat, dreaming of nothing more sinister than the vicar's mislaid sermon notes, gathered her gloves and reticule and descended to the platform. A porter in a tartan waistcoat touched his cap and relieved her of the small pigskin suitcase. Another, taller, in bottle-green livery, stepped forward. "Miss Marple, his lordship's car." The Rolls-Royce was a phantom thrower, its bodywork the colour of ripe mulberries, the radiator mascot a silver stag rampant. The drive north took them through the city's morning clamour. Trams clanging, newsboys crying the latest scandal about a cabinet minister. Then out along the coast road, where the fourth lay gunmetal grey under a sky the shade of wet pewter. Miss Marple observed the gulls wheeling above the water and the fishing smacks bobbing like corks. And she thought how very like human beings they were, each intent upon its own small drama, while the greater currents swept beneath. The gates of the Gilded Manor appeared without warning, wrought iron, 20 feet high, surmounted by the same stag's head that had sealed the invitation. They swung inward at a touch from the chauffeur's gloved hand, revealing a gravelled avenue flanked by rhododendrons the size of cottages. The house itself rose at the end like a stage set for grand opera. 3 stories of honey-coloured stone, pepper-pot turrets, a balustraded roof where statues of nymphs and satyrs disported themselves in attitudes of perpetual surprise. Every window embrasure glittered with gilt, and the great front door, reached by a double sweep of marble steps, was painted a lacquer red that hurt the eye in the pale northern light. A butler of formidable dignity, Mackinnon, his accent informed her, received her in the entrance hall. It was a cavernous apartment, the floor a chessboard of black and white marble, the ceiling painted with a riot of gods and goddesses tumbling through roseate clouds. A bronze fountain in the shape of Neptune spouted real water into a scallop shell. The splash echoed like distant applause. "His lordship will receive you in the winter drawing-room, miss. This way, if you please." Miss Marple followed, her sensible low-heeled shoes making no sound on the thick Wilton carpet. She noted the suits of armour standing sentinel at intervals, the tapestries depicting unicorn hunts, the scent of hothouse lilies that clung to the air like a too-sweet perfume. Everything spoke of money, old money overlaid with newer, brasher money, and of a determination to impress that bordered upon anxiety. The winter drawing-room was smaller, panelled in oak the colour of dark chocolate, with a fire of apple wood blazing in a grate carved with thistles. Lord Alistair Mackenzie rose from a leather wing-chair as she entered. He was taller than she had expected, lean almost to gauntness, with a hawk nose and eyes the cold blue of glacier ice. His morning coat was impeccable, the kilt of the Mackenzie tartan falling in perfect pleats above knees knotted with muscle. A diamond the size of a hazelnut winked in the lace at his throat. "Miss Marple?" His voice was deep, with the faintest rasp of peat smoke. "Sir Henry's description did not prepare me. You are exactly what this house needs. Quiet, observant, and, I suspect, dangerous to malefactors." He took her hand in a grip that was firm but not crushing, then indicated a chair opposite his own. "Tea? Or something stronger? The journey is tedious." "Tea, thank you. Indian, if you have it." A footman in white gloves poured from a George III silver pot. The cups were Sèvres, the spoons apostle spoons, the sugar tongs shaped like stag's antlers. Miss Marple accepted a slice of seed cake and allowed her gaze to travel the room. A portrait above the mantel showed a younger Alistair in Highland dress, standing beside a woman with Elspeth's violet eyes and a smile that held secrets. His first wife, presumably, dead these 15 years. "You are wondering about the house," Lord Alistair said, following her glance. "My grandfather built it in 87, after the Klondike. He believed gold should be seen as well as counted. Hence the gilding. My father tried to tone it down. I have merely maintained the tradition." He gave a short laugh that held no mirth. "Traditions can be burdensome." Miss Marple sipped her tea. Traditions often conceal older sins, Lord Alistair, like ivy on a ruin. His eyes narrowed appreciatively. Precisely why I asked you here. The letters began 3 weeks ago, typewritten on cheap paper. They accuse my nephew Rory of fraud, my ward Elspeth of impropriety, myself of worse. They demand money or exposure. I have ignored them, but ignorance is not always bliss. Before she could reply, the door opened and the other guests entered in a rustle of silk and tweed. Lady Fiona Mackenzie was first. 55, thin as a birch twig, dressed in black velvet that made her look like a crow in mourning. Her eyes were the same icy, blue as her brother's, but filmed with dissatisfaction. She inclined her head the merest fraction. "Miss Marple, my brother collects curiosities." Captain Rory Fraser followed, lounging in the doorway as though the house belonged to him already. He was 28, sun-browned from Malayan rubber plantations, with a smile that showed too many teeth. His tie was the colours of the Gordons. His debts, Miss Marple suspected, were of a different regiment. "Charmed," he drawled, kissing her hand with theatrical gallantry. "Uncle's guardian angel, eh? We must hope you bring a sword as well as wings." Miss Elspeth Fraser came next, a wraith in dove-grey cashmere, her auburn hair twisted into a knot that emphasized the fragility of her neck. She curtsied with old-fashioned grace, but her fingers trembled as they touched Miss Marple's. "I am glad you are here," she whispered. "The house feels watchful." Dr. Lachlan Hume was a bear of a man, bearded like the pard, his tweed suit smelling faintly of carbolic and whisky. He bowed over Miss Marple's hand with courtly gravity. "His lordship's heart is not what it was," he rumbled. "Digitalis is a jealous mistress. One must measure love in drops." Mrs. Vanessa Clyde swept in like a galleon under full sail, blonde, Juno-esque, draped in schiaparelli pink that clashed violently with the tartan carpet. Diamonds flashed at her ears and throat. Her laugh was a peal of bells. "Darlings, the fog is lifting. Rory, you promised me a tour of the dungeons." She linked her arm possessively through the captain's, ignoring Elspeth's flinch. Last came Mr. Percival Blaine, the solicitor, a dry stick of a man in pinstripes, carrying a dispatch case as though it contained the crown jewels. He murmured polite nothings and retreated to a sofa with the Times. Lord Alistair clapped his hands. "Luncheon in half an hour. Mackinnon will show you to your rooms. Miss Marple, you have the Chinese chamber, my late wife's favourite. I trust you will find it comfortable." The Chinese chamber was on the first floor, overlooking the rose garden. The wallpaper was hand-painted silk, depicting cranes and peonies. The bed, a vast four-poster, hung with primrose damask. A fire crackled in the grate. On the dressing table lay a nosegay of white camellias and a card, "Welcome." A.M. Miss Marple unpacked methodically, hanging her black lace gown in the wardrobe, placing her Bible and her notebook on the bedside table. From the window, she could see the guests dispersing across the lawn. Rory and Vanessa strolling toward the maze, Elspeth trailing behind like a lost soul. Lady Fiona already quarrelling with the head gardener about the pruning of the yews. A gong boomed through the corridors. Luncheon! Miss Marple smoothed her hair, adjusted her cameo, and descended the great staircase. In the dining room, a table long enough for a banquet was set for 9. The epagnier was solid gold, but a yew salt cellars shaped like miniature thistles. The first course was consommé madrilène, clear as topaz, Conversation flowed like the wine. Rory teasing Elspeth about her fear of the dark, Vanessa recounting Paris scandals, Dr. Hume discoursing on the therapeutic properties of peat baths. Lady Fiona dissected the shortcomings of the younger generation with surgical precision. Lord Alistair presided at the head, his bonhomie a trifle forced, his eyes flicking continually toward the windows as though expecting an intruder. Miss Marple ate sparingly, observed assiduously. She noted that Rory's left hand, when he thought himself unobserved, strayed to Elspeth's beneath the damask cloth. That Vanessa's smile grew brittle whenever Rory's attention wandered, that Mr. Blaine's dispatch case never left his side, that Dr. Hume refilled Lord Alistair's glass with water, not claret, and watched him drink it with the concentration of a chemist. After luncheon, coffee was served in the library, a cathedral of books, with a gallery reached by a spiral stair and a fireplace large enough to roast an ox. Lord Alistair drew Miss Marple into an alcove beneath a window of stained glass, depicting the Judgment of Paris. "You see them," he said quietly. "A pretty crew. Rory needs money to pay his gambling debts. Monte Carlo last spring. Opium in Singapore before that. Elspeth's fortune is tied up until she's 21, or marries with my consent. Fiona believes I cheated her out of her share of the Fraser millions. Hume, well, he loved my first wife. Some say too much. Vanessa wants a title to go with her divorce settlement. Blaine knows where the bodies are buried, figuratively, I hope." Miss Marple's eyes were mild. "And the letters? Posted in Edinburgh, always. The last arrived yesterday." He drew a folded sheet from his pocket. Cheap paper, typewritten in pica. "You cannot protect them all. The dagger is sharpened." She read it twice, returned it. "The writer is close enough to observe your reactions, Lord Alistair. Close enough, perhaps, to dine at your table." He gave a wintry smile. "Then I am glad you're here to watch the knives." Outside, the clouds lowered again. Rain began to streak the windows. Somewhere in the house, a clock chimed 3. Miss Marple excused herself, pleading the need to rest before the evening's festivities. In the corridor she paused, listening. From the armoury came the faint clink of metal. Someone handling the ancient weapons? She made a mental note. In her room she opened her notebook and wrote in her neat slanting hand, "Motives, greed, jealousy, revenge. Opportunities, all under one roof. The dagger symbolic or literal." She underlined the last line twice, then closed the book and lay down fully dressed upon the primrose counterpane. The rain drummed on the panes like impatient fingers. Somewhere below, a woman laughed. Vanessa's laugh, sharp as breaking crystal. Miss Marple closed her eyes, but her mind remained alert, sifting the day's impressions like a prospector panning for gold. In such houses, she reflected, murder was rarely a matter of impulse. It required planning, patience, and a heart armoured against pity. The anonymous letters were merely the overture. The curtain, she suspected, had yet to rise. Chapter 3. The First Shadow. The afternoon slipped away in a grey hush of rain. Miss Marple, having rested for precisely 20 minutes, she had long ago trained herself to catnaps as precise as a Swiss watch, descended to the walled garden at the rear of the manor. A flagged path, slick with wet leaves, led between yew hedges clipped into the shape of chess pieces. The air was sharp with the scent of box and sodden earth. Somewhere a robin scolded from the shelter of a holly. She had not expected company, Yet there, on a stone bench beneath a weeping ash, sat Elspeth Fraser. The girl wore no coat. Her grey cashmere was darkened at the shoulders by rain, and a single white camellia, half crushed, lay in her lap. She started when Miss Marple's shadow fell across the flags. "Forgive me, my dear. I did not mean to startle you." Miss Marple sat beside her, opening a small umbrella of bottle green silk. "You will take a chill. Young bones are not as forgiving as they pretend." Elspeth managed a tremulous smile. "I like the rain. It makes the house feel farther away." She twisted the camellia stem until it snapped. "Uncle Alistair says I must be gay tonight. There is to be dancing after dinner. But how can one be gay when—" She stopped, biting her lip. "When one is afraid," Miss Marple finished gently. "Fear is a sensible emotion, child, provided one listens to it. What, precisely, do you fear?" For a moment the girl was silent, watching raindrops bead on the Unite's carved shoulder. Then, with the air of one confessing to a priest, she drew a folded paper from her pocket. It was cheap, the creases soft with much handling. "You think the money will save you. It will not." The dagger remembers. Typewritten, like the others, but this time the envelope had been slipped beneath her bedroom door while she dressed for luncheon. Miss Marple turned it over. No postmark. And the others? 3 in all. The first said Rory was only after my fortune. The second hinted that Uncle had changed his will. This one came today. Elspeth's voice shook. "There is a codicil, Miss Marple. Mr. Blaine told me. If I marry without consent, I lose everything to a charity for retired seamen. Rory laughed when I asked him. He said Uncle was teasing. But Rory wants to be married at Christmas, and Uncle keeps putting it off." Miss Marple folded the letter with care. "Captain Fraser strikes me as a young man who dislikes delay. And Mrs. Clyde—" Elspeth flushed. "She was Uncle's guest last summer before Malaya. Rory says it was nothing, but I found a handkerchief in Hitchio's. Dressing-room silk, embroidered with a V. It smelled of her perfume." She pressed her hands to her eyes. "I am 19, Miss Marple. I do not know whether I love Rory or only the idea of being loved. And now someone wants me frightened." "Someone who knows the house intimately," Miss Marple murmured. "The West Wing corridor has a loose board outside your door. Did you hear it creak?" Elspeth nodded, wide-eyed. They were interrupted by the crunch of gravel. Dr. Hume approached, umbrella furled, his beard beaded with rain. He carried a small black bag. "Miss Fraser, your guardian asked me to make sure you took your tonic. The excitement, you understand." He unscrewed a bottle. The liquid within was colourless, smelling faintly of almonds. 3 drops in water, twice daily, for the nerves. Elspeth obediently swallowed. Miss Marple noted the label, Tinct Digitalis, and the doctor's steady hand as he measured. Too steady, perhaps. "Digitalis," she said conversationally. "A dangerous friend, Doctor. I once knew a lady in Much Benham who mistook the dose and was buried within the week." Hume's eyes glinted behind spectacles. "Lord Alistair's prescription is exact, I assure you. His heart is a tired engine. Digitalis is the oil that keeps it turning." He capped the bottle. "Though I confess, last Tuesday the level was lower than it should have been. Careless nursing, no doubt. Or careful tampering," Miss Marple suggested mildly. The doctor gave a short laugh. "You have a dramatic imagination, ma'am. Come, Elspeth, you must change for tea." Left alone, Miss Marple pursued her walk. The garden gave way to a shrubbery. where a wrought iron gate opened onto the stable yard. Grooms were exercising a pair of chestnuts. The smell of oats and leather was comforting. Beyond lay the old laundry, now converted to a carpenter's shop. The door stood ajar. Inside, a man in a baize apron was planing a length of oak. Shavings curled like golden ribbons. On the bench lay a dirk, its blade bright, the hilt wrapped in new leather. The armourer, presumably. "Good afternoon," Miss Marple said. "A handsome weapon." The man touched his forelock. "For the display in the long gallery, ma'am. His lordship likes them kept sharp. Though this one's a replacement, the original went missing last month. Funny thing, the blunt one's still there, but the real blade vanished." "Vanished," Miss Marple repeated, "and no one noticed. Only when I came to polish. Thought one of the guests had taken it for a joke. Captain Fraser's fond of practical jokes." She thanked him and returned to the house by a side door. In the gun-room she found Rory cleaning a shotgun, humming a music-hall tune. He looked up, startled. "Miss Marple, exploring the arsenal. Careful, some of these pieces are loaded." "I was admiring the craftsmanship," she said. "Tell me, Captain, do you believe in ghosts?" He laughed, but uneasily. "Only the ghosts of unpaid bills. Why?" "Because someone in this house is haunted by the past. And ghosts, you know, have a way of demanding payment." Rory snapped the breech shut. "If you mean Uncle's precious letters, they're a hoax. Probably Fiona. She's venomous enough. Lady Fiona is direct," Miss Marple observed. "Anonymous letters are the weapon of the indirect, of the person who watches from the shadows." She left him frowning and climbed the back stairs to the first floor. The corridor was dim, lit by a single gas jet. Outside Elspeth's door, the floorboard gave a betraying squeak beneath her slight weight. She paused, listening. From within came the sound of drawers being opened and shut. Hurried, furtive. Miss Marple knocked. The sounds ceased. After a moment, Vanessa Clyde appeared, cheeks flushed, a lace handkerchief twisted in her fingers. "Oh, Miss Marple, I was looking for Elspeth. We are to choose ribbons for the dance tonight." Her smile was too bright. "Miss Fraser is with Dr. Hume," Miss Marple said. "Perhaps I can assist." Vanessa's eyes flicked to the corridor behind her. "Another time, I must change." She brushed past, leaving a trail of fleur de rocaille. In the drawing-room at tea, the party reassembled. Scones, black-currant jam, a Dundee cake rich with fruit. Lord Alastair presided, but his colour was high, his hand unsteady as he lifted his cup. Miss Marple noticed that Dr. Hume watched him covertly, and that Mr. Blaine's dispatch case now reposed upon his lap as though glued there. Conversation turned to the evening's entertainment. A gramophone had been wound. The latest records from America, Duke Ellington she believed, were promised. Rory proposed charades. Vanessa clapped her hands like a child. Only Elspeth remained silent, crumbling a scone upon her plate. At 6 o'clock the sky cleared to a watery lemon. Miss Marple slipped away to the library, where she found a volume of Scottish peerages. A quick search confirmed her suspicions. The Fraser fortune derived from jute mills in Dundee. Elspeth's father had died in a hunting accident when she was 3. Her mother, Lord Alistair's sister, had followed a year later of pneumonia. The estate was held in trust until the girl's majority or marriage. She closed the book as Lady Fiona entered, swathed in a tea-gown of violet crepe. "Snooping, Miss Marple?" The voice was acid. "Merely satisfying curiosity, Lady Fiona, a habit of age." "Curiosity killed the cat," the older woman snapped. "And satisfaction, I am told, is a dangerous luxury in this house." She swept out, leaving a wake of l'heure bleue and malice. Dinner was announced at 8. Salmon from the Spey, roast grouse, a charlotte russe. The dining room chandeliers blazed, reflecting 1,000 diamonds in the gilt mirrors. Lord Alistair, in the full fig of evening tartan, proposed a toast to his 60th year. His voice was hearty, but Miss Marple saw the pulse beating too rapidly at his temple. Afterward, the ladies withdrew to the winter drawing-room, while the gentlemen lingered over port. Vanessa played the piano, Chopin with more vigour than accuracy. Elspeth sat apart, twisting a ring on her finger. Miss Marple joined her. "Courage, child! Tonight is only a prelude." At 10 the gramophone was set up in the long gallery. The floor had been polished to a mirror. Ancestral portraits glared down in disapproval as couples whirled to "It Don't Mean a Thing." Lord Alistair danced once with Vanessa, then retired to a sofa, fanning himself. Dr. Hume hovered nearby, digitalis bottle in hand. Miss Marple, pleading fatigue, watched from a gilded chair. She noted Rory's flushed face, Vanessa's possessive grip, Elspeth's refusal of all partners save Mr. Blaine, who trod on her toes with apologetic precision. At 11:30 the record ended abruptly. The lights flickered as a gust rattled the windows. Lord Alistair rose. "A nightcap, then bed. Tomorrow we shoot." But as the guests dispersed, Miss Marple lingered. In the shadow of a suit of armour she found a scrap of paper, torn from a letter. Only 3 words remained. "The dagger remembers." She slipped it into her evening bag. Somewhere in the house a clock struck 12, and the wind moaned in the chimney like a warning. Chapter 4. The Midnight Cry. The house settled into the hush that follows a late party. Doors closing with soft finality. The last footman's tread dying along the corridor. The gramophone record left to spin itself into silence. Miss Marple, in her room, had exchanged the black lace for a quilted dressing gown of violet wool and wool-lined slippers. She sat at the little rosewood desk, her notebook open, the torn scrap of paper smoothed beneath the green-shaded lamp. "The dagger remembers." The words were typewritten in the same pico-face as the anonymous letters. The paper was cheap, thin, the kind sold by the choir in any stationer's. She turned it to the light. A faint watermark, a crown above the letters WS. She made a note, then closed the book and listened. The manor breathed around her, old timber contracting in the cold, water gurgling in hidden pipes, the wind prowling the leads like a restless cat. At 20 minutes past 12, a board creaked in the passage outside her door. Slow, deliberate, testing. Miss Marple rose without haste, turned the key in the lock, and opened the door a careful inch. The corridor was empty, lit only by a single gas jet turned low. A draught stirred the runner. Somewhere, a window stood unlatched. She waited until the creak sounded again, farther off now, toward the west wing, then closed the door and returned to her chair. Sleep, she decided, would be a wasted luxury tonight. At 12:30 she heard it. A woman's cry, sharp, cut off as though a hand had been clapped over the mouth. It came from the long gallery. Miss Marple was already moving. She snatched a small electric torch from her dressing case, slipped along the passage in stockinged feet, and descended the great staircase. The hall was in darkness, save for the dying glow of the hall fire. The bronze Neptune still spouted, but the sound was louder now, unnaturally loud in the stillness. The long gallery ran the length of the west front, a cavern of shadows and moonlight. A French window at the far end stood ajar. Rain blew in, stippling the parquet. Beneath the stern gaze of a Mackenzie in full war paint lay Lord Alistair. He was on his back, arms flung wide, the jewelled dirk buried to the hilt beneath his left breast. Blood had soaked the white pleats of his dress shirt, darkening the tartan. His eyes were open, reflecting the moon like chips of ice. Elspeth Fraser stood over him, both hands pressed to her lips. She wore a dressing gown of peach satin. Her feet were bare, the hem sodden with rain. "Uncle!" The word was a sob. She swayed, and Miss Marple caught her before she fell. "Steady, child! Breathe!" Miss Marple's voice was calm, the voice she had used on bombed-out civilians in the war. She eased Elspeth onto a tapestry-covered settee, then knelt beside the body. No pulse at the throat, the skin already cooling. The dirk was the twin of the one she had seen in the carpenter's shop. New blade, old hilt. She did not touch it. Footsteps pounded. Rory, in pyjamas and a silk dressing gown of sulphurous yellow, hair tousled. He stopped short, face blanching. "Good God!" He dropped to one knee. "Uncle! Alistair!" His fingers hovered over the dirk, then withdrew as though burned. "We must rouse the house," Miss Marple said. "Captain Fraser, ring for Mackinnon, and send someone to lock the outer doors." Rory stumbled away. Lights blazed, doors flew open. Lady Fiona appeared in a wrapper of puce velvet, eyes glittering like jet beads. "My brother! Murdered!" Her voice rose to a shriek. "I knew it! Those letters!" Dr. Hume followed, carrying his black bag, beard bristling with agitation. He knelt, felt for the carotid, then shook his head. Instantaneous, the blade severed the aorta. He looked up at Miss Marple. Digitalis in his system. I gave him the usual dose at 11. Enough to slow the heart, not stop it. This, he gestured at the dirk, finished the work. Vanessa Clyde drifted in, wrapped in something diaphanous and unsuitable, diamonds still at her ears. She gave a theatrical gasp and clutched Rory's arm. Mr. Blaine, fully dressed, dispatch case clutched to his chest, hovered in the doorway like a nervous clerk. Mackinnon, imperturbable in a tartan dressing gown, took charge. "I've telephoned the police, my lord. Miss, I mean. Inspector Craddock will be here within the hour. No one is to leave the gallery." The guests were shepherded to the morning room, a smaller apartment smelling of beeswax and cedar. A fire was laid but not lit. The chill seeped through the floorboards. Miss Marple sat Elspeth in a corner, wrapped a rug about her shoulders, and accepted a cup of tea from a trembling housemaid. The girl's teeth chattered against the rim. "I heard him call out," Elspeth whispered. "Just once. My name. I ran downstairs in my bare feet. The French window was open. He was lying there. Had you been asleep?" "No, I couldn't. After the dancing, I went to the library for a book. Someone was already there. I heard the door close. I thought it was Rory." She shivered. When I came back to my room, the letter was on my pillow. She produced it from her dressing-gown pocket, crumpled and damp. "Tonight the dagger strikes. Run if you can." Miss Marple tucked it away. "You are safe now, child. The police will want to speak to you, but not yet." Inspector Craddock arrived at 20 minutes past 1. A burly man in a damp Burberry Lanarkshire, vowels softened by years in Edinburgh. He brought 2 constables and a police surgeon who looked scarcely older than Elspeth. The gallery was sealed, photographs taken, the body removed on a stretcher beneath a sheet. Craddock interviewed each guest in the library, the door firmly closed. Miss Marple, last to be called, found him seated at the desk, notebook open, a pipe smouldering in an ashtray shaped like a thistle. "Miss Marple, Sir Henry Clithering warned me you'd be mixed up in this." His tone was respectful, but wary. "Lord Alistair summoned you because of the letters?" "He feared mischief. I arrived yesterday." Craddock tapped the pile of anonymous notes, now in cellophane envelopes. "All typewritten on the same machine. Remington portable, common as dirt. Posted in Edinburgh, except the last two which were delivered by hand. We'll dust for prints, but I'm not hopeful." He leaned forward. "The weapons from the armoury display. The sharp blade was substituted for a blunt replica 3 weeks ago. The armourer noticed yesterday. No fingerprints but the housemaid's. She polishes every Friday. The French window was unlatched from inside. Footprints in the rose bed, small, a woman's or a slight man's, leading to the gravel, then lost. Time of death, between 12 and 12:30. The doctor's digitalis would have made him drowsy. He probably came to the gallery for air. Someone was waiting." Miss Marple considered. "Lord Alistair's bedtime whisky. Did anyone see it poured?" "Dr. Hume mixed it himself. Whisky, water, 3 drops of digitalis. He swears the bottle was full at 11. We've sent it to the lab." She told him of the cry, the open window, the scrap of paper, Elspeth's letter. Craddock made notes in a neat slanting hand. "Alibis," he said. "Lady Fiona claims she was reading in bed. Light seen under her door at 12:15 by the housemaid. Captain Fraser and Mrs. Clyde say they were together in the conservatory until 12:30. Orchids, they said. The maid saw Mrs. Clyde on the back stairs alone at 11:40, but no one can confirm after that. Miss Fraser admits wandering the library. Dr. Hume was in his room, adjoining the gallery by a connecting door, but it's bolted on both sides. Mr. Blaine was writing letters in the study. The window was unlatched, but he says he opened it for air." He closed the notebook. "Motives thick on the ground. The will leaves everything to Miss Fraser, with Captain Fraser trustee until she's 21. If she dies unmarried, it reverts to Lady Fiona. Rory Fraser's up to his eyes in debt. Monte Carlo, Singapore. Mrs. Clyde's divorce settlement depends on her remarrying well. Dr. Hume was engaged to the First Lady Mackenzie. She died in childbirth, some said neglect. Blaine knows the family secrets." Miss Marple nodded. "And the codicil? Sealed in the safe. Blaine has the combination. Lord Alistair had the only other key. We'll open it tomorrow." Craddock escorted her to the door. "Stay close, Miss Marple. This house is a powder keg, and someone struck the match." Back in the morning room, the guests sat in frozen tableau. Rory staring into the cold grate, Vanessa twisting a handkerchief to shreds, Lady Fiona rigid with fury, Elspeth asleep from shock beneath the rug. Dr. Hume paced, muttering about post-mortems. Mr. Blaine's dispatch case lay on his knees like a shield. Chapter 5. The Weight of Motives. The morning arrived in a sullen drizzle, the fourth hidden behind a curtain of grey. Breakfast was laid in the smaller dining room. Porridge, kippers, devilled kidneys, but the silver covers remained untouched. Mackinnon moved like a man in a trance, his face the colour of putty. The guests assembled in the winter drawing-room at Inspector Craddock's request, seated upon velvet chairs that might have been thrones at a wake. Craddock stood before the fireplace, pipe clenched between his teeth, a constable at the door. Dr. Hume had administered sedatives. Elspeth was pale but composed, a vein flickering at her temple. Lady Fiona wore black from crown to toe, a jet brooch at her throat like a mourning beetle. Rory nursed a cigarette, the smoke curling past eyes reddened by more than sleeplessness. Vanessa had draped a sable stole over her shoulders, though the room was warm. Mr. Blaine's dispatch case reposed upon his knees as though grafted there. Lord Alistair Mackenzie, Craddock began, died between 12 and 12:30 of a single stab wound to the heart. The weapon is a dirk from the armoury, its sharp blade substituted for a ceremonial replica some 3 weeks ago. The post-mortem confirms digitalis in the blood. Therapeutic dose, no more. Death was caused by the blade, not poison. He paused, letting the words settle. The French window was opened from inside. Footprints in the rosebed led to the gravel and vanished. The connecting door between Dr. Hume's room and the gallery is bolted on the gallery's side. Bolt stiff with disuse, no scratches. The whiskey glass was found on a side table, rinsed clean. No fingerprints on the dirk save the housemaid's. The anonymous letters were typed on a Remington portable. None such has been found in the house. Lady Fiona broke the silence. Then it was an intruder. A burglar surprised in the act. Possible, Craddock conceded, but the dirk was taken from the display used and left in the body. A burglar does not arm himself with a museum piece, and the letters point to someone with intimate knowledge of family affairs. He turned to Mr. Blaine. The safe, if you please. The solicitor rose with reluctance, producing a key on a gold chain. The safe, concealed behind a portrait of Hamish Mackenzie in Klondike furs, clicked open. Inside lay a single envelope, sealed with crimson wax. Blaine slit it with a paper knife. "Read it aloud," Craddock ordered. Blaine's voice was dry as parchment. I, Alistair Ian Hamish Mackenzie, being of sound mind, bequeathed the sum of £50,000 to Dr. Lachlan Hume, in gratitude for services rendered to my late wife, Moira Fraser Mackenzie, and in recompense for professional discretion during the inquiry into her death. The residue of my estate to my ward, Elspeth Fraser, absolutely upon her 21st birthday, or upon her marriage, with the consent of my trustee, Captain Rory Fraser. Should she die unmarried before attaining her majority, the estate to pass to my sister, Lady Fiona Mackenzie. Signed and witnessed this 15th day of September. A collective intake of breath. Dr. Hume's beard twitched. He stared at the carpet as though it had opened beneath him. 50,000, Lady Fiona hissed. For silence! I always said Moira's death was hushed up. Neglect, criminal neglect. Steady, madam, Craddock warned. The inquest found misadventure. Dr. Hume was exonerated. Exonerated? Fiona's laugh was bitter, with Mackenzie money-greasing palms. Elspeth's voice was small. Uncle never told me of the codicil. He promised the money would be mine, free and clear. Rory crushed out his cigarette. He changed his mind after Singapore. Said I was a bad influence. Wanted you married to some steady banker. His tone was light, but his knuckles were white. Vanessa leaned forward, eyes glittering. And you, Doctor, 50,000 reasons to keep Lord Alistair alive until the will was signed, and then— Enough! Craddock rapped. We deal in evidence, not innuendo. Miss Marple, who had been knitting a grey sock for the Belgian refugees, laid down her needles. If I may, Inspector, the poison attempt, if attempt it was, predated the murder by several days. The digitalis bottle was tampered with last week, Dr. Hume tells us. Yet the stabbing was opportunistic. The dirk seized in the gallery. Two methods suggest either two murderers or one who feared the first would fail. Craddock nodded. The lab confirms the whiskey held only the prescribed dose. Someone may have added digitalis earlier, hoping for a quiet heart attack. When his lordship survived, the dirk was Plan B. He dismissed the party with instructions to remain within call. Miss Marple lingered, drawing Craddock aside. "The rinsed glass bothers me," she said. "A murderer in haste would scarcely pause to wash up. Yet a murderer with presence of mind might wish to remove traces of digitalis, or of something else." "Sedative, perhaps," Craddock mused, "to ensure his lordship stayed in the gallery. Or to cloud a witness's memory. Miss Fraser heard her name called, yet found no one near the body but herself." They were interrupted by Mackinnon, bearing a salver. Upon it lay a small object wrapped in tissue. "Found in the rose bed, sir, beneath the window." Craddock unwrapped a lady's slipper. White kid, high-heeled, sodden with mud. "Size 5, the label read Paris." Vanessa's eyes widened. She opened her mouth, then closed it. "Mrs. Clyde?" Craddock prompted. I have a pair like them," she admitted, "but I was wearing gold sandals last night. These must be Elspeth's." Elspeth shook her head. "I have no white kid slippers. My evening shoes are silver." Craddock bagged the slipper. "We'll check wardrobes. No one is to leave the house." Luncheon was a travesty. Cold ham, salad wilted in the damp. Afterward, Miss Marple sought the conservatory, a glass cathedral of palms and orchids. Rory was there, pacing between the ferns. "Damnable business," he burst out. "Uncle was a tyrant, but murder, and that codicil, 50,000 to Hume. The old fox was buying silence with my inheritance." "Your inheritance?" Miss Marple inquired mildly. "Elspeth's, then. Same thing if we marry." He ran a hand through his hair. "Look here, Miss Marple, I'm no saint. Monte Carlo, yes, lost a packet, but I'd not kill for it. Uncle was softening, another month, and he'd have given consent." "Yet someone believed otherwise," she said. "Someone who typed the dagger remembers on cheap paper." Rory flushed. "I've a portable Remington in my room, bought in Singapore, but I haven't touched it in weeks." She left him among the orchids and climbed to the armoury. The display of weapons glinted coldly. The space where the sharp dirk had hung was marked by a square of unfaded velvet. She examined the blunt replica. Identical hilt, blade of painted wood. A clever substitution, but the weight would betray it to any hand that lifted it. Downstairs in the butler's pantry, Mackinnon was polishing silver with mechanical precision. "Tell me, Mackinnon," Miss Marple asked, "who has access to the West Wing after midnight?" The butler hesitated. "The family, of course, and Dr. Hume. His room connects to the gallery. The housemaids lock the baize door at 11, but there's a key in the housekeeper's cupboard. And the priest's hole? Priest's hole!" He lowered his voice. "Behind the panelling, in the long gallery, leads to the old chapel, disused these 50 years. His lordship showed it to Captain Rory last summer, thought it a joke. The catch is a carved thistle. Press it, and the panel slides." Miss Marple thanked him and returned to the drawing-room. Dr. Hume was alone, staring into the fire. 50,000, he said without turning. "Blood money, Miss Marple. Moira died in my arms, hemorrhage after childbirth. I was young, inexperienced. The family physician was drunk in Edinburgh. I did what I could. Alistair blamed me, yet paid for my silence. I never touched a penny until yesterday." "Yet someone believed you had cause," she said gently. He swung round, eyes fierce. "I loved Moira. I would not harm her brother. Love and hate are close neighbours, Doctor, and digitalis is a precise weapon." He flinched. "The bottle was in my bag, locked. Anyone could have added drops over days. Slow accumulation. Anyone with a key? His lordship had a duplicate, and the dispensary in my room unlocked." Miss Marple nodded and went in search of Elspeth. She found the girl in the library, curled in a window seat with a volume of Shelley unopened on her lap. "I am to be married in haste," Elspeth said dully. "Rory insists. Inspector Craddock says the will is clear. I inherit, but I feel like a parcel being fought over." "Parcels have no choice," Miss Marple replied. "Young women do. Tell me, child, did you love your guardian?" Elspeth's eyes filled. "He was stern but kind. He promised to take me to Italy when I was 21. Now he is gone, and I am rich and friendless." "Not friendless," Miss Marple said, "but beware of those who profess friendship too ardently." Tea was served at 4, seed cake, anchovy toast, a silence thick as fog. Lady Fiona announced her intention to return to London. Craddock refused permission. Vanessa retired to her room with a migraine. Rory disappeared to the billiard room. Dr. Hume was summoned to examine the whisky decanter. Mr. Blaine locked himself in the study with the estate papers. At 6 the rain ceased. A watery sun glinted on the wet lawns. Miss Marple walked to the rosebed beneath the long gallery window. The footprints were blurred but visible. Small, narrow, the heel mark of a fashionable shoe. She stooped, plucked a shred of white kid from a thorn, and slipped it into her handbag. Chapter 6. The Unravelling. The following morning broke clear and cold, the sky a hard enamel blue above the Firth. Inspector Craddock had ordered the long gallery sealed. A constable stood guard like a blue-uniformed sentinel. The house party assembled in the winter drawing-room at 10, summoned by a note delivered with the breakfast, trays. Miss Marple entered last, her dove-grey knitting bag over one arm, her expression as placid as a summer duck pond. Craddock waited beside the fireplace, a cardboard box at his feet. Dr. Hume's beard looked freshly trimmed. Rory's eyes were bloodshot. Vanessa wore dark glasses despite the gloom. Lady Fiona sat rigid, gloved hands clasped like claws. Elspeth, in navy wool, looked as though she had not slept. Mr. Blaine's dispatch case was absent for once. Locked in the safe, he had informed the inspector. "New evidence," Craddock announced. He opened the box and produced the white kid slipper, now cleaned and dried. "Size 5, Paris label. Mrs. Clyde, you admitted owning a similar pair. Your maid confirms the mate is missing from your luggage." Vanessa removed the glasses. Her eyes were swollen. "I lent them to Elspeth for the dance. She returned them muddy, said she'd walked in the garden. I threw the pair away." Elspeth shook her head. "I never borrowed them. My silver shoes are in my wardrobe." Craddock produced a second item, a torn scrap of white kid, thorn snagged. "Found in the rose bed, matches the slipper, and this?" A small glass phial, half full of colourless liquid. Digitalis concentrated, hidden in the priest's hole behind the gallery panelling. The catch was oiled recently, no dust on the steps. Dr. Hume started. "That is not my bottle. Mine is in my bag, labelled, measured." "Indeed," Craddock said. "This one bears no label. Enough to fell 3 men." Miss Marple laid her knitting aside. "If I may, Inspector." She rose, small and erect. "We have danced around motives long enough. Let us assemble the pieces." She turned to the company with the air of a schoolmistress, addressing a difficult class. Lord Alistair received anonymous letters threatening exposure. They began after Captain Fraser's return from Singapore, where I believe certain financial irregularities occurred. Rubber shares, was it not? The letters were typed on a Remington portable. Captain Fraser owns such a machine. Rory flushed. "Anyone could have used it. My door is never locked." "Precisely," Miss Marple said, "as is the dispensary in Dr. Hume's room. Digitalis was added to his lordship's bottle over several days. Slow, cumulative poisoning. The murderer hoped for a natural death. When Lord Alistair survived, stronger measures were needed." She faced Dr. Hume. "You knew the dose, Doctor. You mixed the bedtime whiskey. Yet you also knew of the codicil. £50,000 for silence about Moira's death. Silence you had kept for 15 years. Why suddenly demand payment?" Hume's beard quivered. "I did not. Alistair offered it. Said he wished to make amends before he died." "Convenient," Lady Fiona sneered. "A murderer's confession gift-wrapped." Miss Marple continued. "The dirk was substituted 3 weeks ago. The sharp blade hidden where? In the priest's hole, perhaps with the digitalis. The murderer needed access to the gallery after midnight. The connecting door was bolted, the baize door locked. But the priest's hole opens behind the panelling, steps leading to the disused chapel. From there, a door to the rose garden." She paused, letting the silence stretch. "On the night of the murder, Lord Alistair took his whiskey at 11, retired to the gallery for air, digitalis making him drowsy. Someone followed through the priest's hole, carrying the dirk. But his lordship was stronger than expected. He cried out Elspeth's name because he had just confronted his blackmailer in the library. The stab was delivered in panic. The murderer fled back through the priest's hole, losing a slipper in the rosebed. The French window was open to suggest an intruder." Vanessa laughed shrilly. "Fairy tales! I was with Rory until 11:40, Miss Marple said. The housemaid saw you on the back stairs alone. You went to the chapel, changed to the white slippers, less noise on stone, entered the priest's hole, and waited. When Lord Alistair appeared, you struck, but you are not the poisoner." She turned to Rory. "You typed the letters, Captain, to frighten your uncle into consenting to the marriage. You added digitalis gradually, hoping for a quiet death that would make you trustee of Elspeth's fortune. But you lacked the courage for the final act." Rory's face was chalk. "Prove it." "The Remington," Craddock said. "We tested it this morning. The E sticks, matches every letter. And your fingerprints are on the digitalis bottle in the priest's hole. You moved it yesterday when you thought no one watched." Rory lunged for the door. The constable caught him. Vanessa screamed, clawing at the air. "But the stab," she gasped, "was Mrs. Clyde's improvisation," Miss Marple said. She believed Rory would inherit if Elspeth were implicated, hence the letter on the pillow, the slipper planted. She meant to frame the girl and secure Rory for herself. 2 murderers, Inspector, with different aims. The poisoner wished a natural death, the stabber a scandal that would ruin Elspeth. Craddock snapped handcuffs on Rory. "Captain Rory Fraser, I arrest you for the attempted murder of Lord Alistair Mackenzie by poisoning, Mrs. Vanessa Clyde for the murder by stabbing." Vanessa collapsed, sobbing. Dr. Hume sank into a chair, head in hands. Lady Fiona stared at the carpet as though it had betrayed her. Elspeth began to cry silently. Miss Marple resumed her seat and picked up her knitting. Greed and jealousy, Inspector, the oldest motives in the world and the most fatal. Later, in the library, Craddock closed his notebook. The priest's hole was the key. How did you suspect? In Mudge Benham, Miss Marple said. Our old manor had one. Smugglers, you know. And the slipper. Mrs. Clyde's maid remembered her. Mistress asking for White Kid for a surprise. The surprise was murder. Craddock escorted the prisoners to the waiting car. The manor's great door closed behind them with the finality of a tomb. Chapter 7. The Quiet Return. The police cars had vanished down the gravelled avenue before the church clock in the distant village struck 9. A pale November sun glimmered on the wet lawns. The rhododendrons dripped like mourners too exhausted for further tears. Miss Marple stood on the front steps, her pigskin suitcase at her feet, watching Mackinnon supervise the loading of the rolls. The Stag's Head knocker seemed to regard her with mournful resignation. Elspeth Fraser appeared in the doorway, wrapped in a camel-hair coat 2 sizes too large. Lord Alister's, no doubt. Her eyes were dry now, the violet shadowed but steady. I am to stay with Aunt Clementina in Perth until the lawyers settle everything, she said. The money feels like stolen goods, Miss Marple. Uncle wanted me to be happy, not rich. Happiness is a talent, child, Miss Marple replied, and you have the makings of it. Study medicine, as you planned. Heal others, and the money will heal itself. Elspeth managed a tremulous smile. You will write. Every Christmas with a recipe for plum pudding. Miss Marple pressed a small parcel into the girl's hand, her half-finished blue scarf. Knit the rest yourself. It keeps the mind from brooding. Dr. Hume emerged next, carrying his own bag. The beard was trimmed to a point. The eyes behind spectacles were calm, almost relieved. The codicil stands, he said quietly. I shall endow a maternity ward in Moira's name. The rest goes to medical missions. Alistair would approve the irony. He bowed over Miss Marple's hand. You have given me back my conscience, ma'am. Lady Fiona swept past without a word, black veil fluttering like a battle flag. Her maid followed with a mountain of luggage. Mr. Blaine, dispatch case restored, paused to shake Miss Marple's hand. The estate is solvent, thank heaven. Miss Fraser will want for nothing. He hesitated. Rory's debts, Monte Carlo, Singapore, will be paid from his own expectancy. A lesson, perhaps. Lessons are rarely learned in prison, Miss Marple observed, but sometimes they are taught there. The chauffeur opened the door of the rolls. Miss Marple settled into the leather-scented interior, her knitting bag on the seat beside her. As the car purred through the gates, she looked back once. The Gilded Manor gleamed in the thin sunlight, its turrets sharp against the sky, already shrinking into legend. Inspector Craddock had insisted on seeing her to the station. He climbed in opposite, pipe unlit in deference to her presence. Vanessa Clyde has confessed, he said, claims she acted alone in the stabbing, says Rory knew nothing of the dirk. Love, she calls it. A queer sort of love that plants a blade in a man's heart. Love is often the mask jealousy wears, Miss Marple murmured, and jealousy is a solvent that eats through every bond. Craddock tapped the window. The typewriter was in Rory's room, right enough, and his prints on the file. He'll hang for the attempt, if not the completion. The Crown prefers a clean case. At Waverley Station, the platform was crowded with Saturday shoppers and soldiers on leave. Craddock carried her suitcase to the first-class carriage, then stood awkwardly, cap in hand. "Sir Henry will want the full story," he said. "You'll oblige." "When I have knitted the heel of this sock," Miss Marple promised, "details are like stitches. One dropped, and the whole unravels." The train pulled out amid steam and whistles. Miss Marple opened her notebook for the last time, and wrote in her neat slant, "Priest's Hole oiled, 10th October, Mackinnon's Ledger. White slippers purchased, Paris, 3rd October, Vanessa's maid. Digitalis missing, 8th Wit, 14th October, Hume's dispensary book. Rory's Remington, key sticks, confirmed. Motive, greed, Rory. Jealousy, Vanessa. Fear, both." She closed the book, tucked it away, and took up her knitting. The Scottish landscape unrolled, heather darkening to moor, stone walls, a solitary piper on a hill. At Carlisle she changed for the south, and by dusk the familiar hedgerows of Much Benham appeared, laced with the first frost. Danemead Cottage was warm with lamplight. Cherry had banked the fire and set a kettle singing. Mrs. Dane arrived within the hour. Russet tweeds exchanged for a tea-gown, eyes bright with curiosity. "Jane, the newspapers are full of it. Peer stabbed in Highland Castle. Was it dreadful?" Miss Marple poured tea, Indian strong, and handed across a slice of Cherry's seed cake. "Dreadful for the victims, my dear. Lord Alistair, poor man, and 2 young people who mistook possession for love. The house itself was merely the stage." Mrs. Dane leaned forward. "But the details, the dagger, the priest's hole, are best left to the official report," Miss Marple said firmly. "Though I will say this, never underestimate the power of a small footprint in a rosebed. It can lead further than any confession." She resumed her knitting, the blue scarf growing row by row. Outside, the church clock struck 7. A blackbird practised its evening phrase. Life in Much Benham flowed on. Small scandals, harvest suppers, the vicar's new sermon on forgiveness. Miss Marple's needles clicked in quiet rhythm, and if her eyes occasionally strayed to the firelit shadows, it was only to assure herself that no dagger glinted there. In the drawer of the gate-legged table lay the torn scrap of paper. The dagger remembers. She had kept it as a reminder that memory, like justice, is a patient hunter. Tomorrow she would burn it in the kitchen range, and the Gilded Manor would become another tale told over. Teacups, its gilt tarnished, its secrets sealed. For now, the kettle sang, the fire crackled, and Miss Jane Marple, having unravelled one skein of human folly, turned her mind to the simpler pattern of a scarf, row upon row, stitch upon stitch, until the wool was whole, and the heart, if not mended, at least at peace.